Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be always acceptable to you, O God, my strength and my redeemer. Amen. Y'all, death and dying are an uncomfortable reality of our lives. And even while we grieve and mourn the loss over that which we had, it's important to see that in Jesus, we are always being called to the new season of life beyond. Downtown Columbus, Ohio, there was a United Methodist Church, small one down on Parsons Avenue, and it was dying. It had fewer and fewer members who were getting older and older, and not a lot of new members were joining in, and they looked around. Their church was dying. But as the community changed around them, they resisted. They resisted. They liked things the way they were, the way they had them. So fought back against any kind of change, holding on even at the point of death. Their church was dying. Thousands of years earlier, King Saul, his kingdom was dying. He knew that God's favor had passed on to David and that changes were coming, but he resisted. He liked what he had and didn't want to let it go. He was dying. Centuries later, at the Galilee, a woman had a disease, and it was slowly killing her. She resisted with all her might any kind of change. She loved the life she had. She wanted it back and gave up everything, all of her money, until she was alone and had lost everything. And the disease was just getting worse. She was dying. And in that very same town, the leader of the synagogue, a man named Jairus, his daughter was dying. And he fought with everything he had. He didn't want the life that he loved taken away from him. But it was slowly being stripped away. But finally, he looked at Jesus. And although looking at what Jesus was offering was a challenge to his way of life, he finally reached a point at his daughter's death where he was willing to accept that things couldn't be the same. He was willing to accept that a new season had come upon him. All of us will have multiple experiences over the course of our lives of death and dying, in our physical bodies, of course, but in the death of the life that we had, changes will come. Children will grow up and leave. Jobs will change. Communities will change. There'll be natural disasters. There'll be economic changes. There'll be cultural changes. We can hold on and we can try to fight and resist that, but the world is always going to be in a cycle of the dying of the old and the birthing of the new. And so what I see Jesus calling us to is not to refuse, not to fight death, but to understand that it's okay to mourn it. It's okay to grieve that we had something that we liked and to celebrate that we had it for what it was, while also at the same time being able to look ahead toward what Jesus is inviting us to next. As we are born into the new season to come, where is God at work in the world? And how can we be a part of it? You see, Saul did die. And when King Saul died, David became the new king of Israel. And when the people of God looked upon David and saw the godliness in his work, he became an even better king than Saul was. Ended up being regarded as the best king Israel ever had. When the woman with the bleeding disorder was finally willing to try something new, she reached out and embraced Jesus, even though she meant that she was not going to get her old life back. It was healing. She was healed and brought into a new life as a disciple following Jesus, even though she could celebrate and love the memory of the life that she had before. She could embrace the new life that was coming next for her. And when Jairus' daughter was brought back to him, it literally was new life for her, but it was new life for Jairus too, the leader of the synagogue, who had finally been opened up, losing what was old, finally opened him up to being able to see a new way of following the Messiah that he was waiting for and loved. It led to changed lives of so many people who came to become followers of Christ. That church in downtown Columbus died. It died. They lost what they had, but they had this empty building and didn't know what to do with it. And finally, somebody came up to them and said, you know what, hey, we really could use some space to do like a free exchange grocery store where we'll donate food and people can come and get what they need and people can volunteer to work there. And they were open to it, finally, because they had died. They were open to the change that was coming. And the grocery store was a huge success, and people came and started feeding each other. And then somebody started doing laundry ministry, and then somebody else opened a bike repair service where they were fixing people's bikes so they could get to work and get a job. And then doctors started showing up and offering free medical advice to people who came on Wednesday nights, and a lawyer started coming and offering helpful legal advice to people who needed it. Teachers started showing up and tutoring children who had come needing help with their homework, and it became a growing, thriving community of people who just started caring for one another where they were and offering what they had. And as Paul points out in Corinthians, those who had much didn't have too much, and those who had little didn't have too little. They were just supporting each other. And finally, somebody said, hey, could somebody start offering prayers around here? And they started gathering in prayer, and they started studying the Bible together, and then they started holding Sunday morning gatherings, and we're a thriving, loving community of people gathering on Sunday mornings, praising God and loving one another. And a new church, the Church for All People in Columbus, Ohio, was born into a new season after the death of the old. It was only possible, not because they gave up loving what they had before. They still love what they had before and cherish what they had. But they were willing to look at the new season that came into their lives and see where God was at work in it and see how they could participate in it. My hope for all of us is that in the many deaths and dyings that you will have in your life, we will all have in our lives, that we can hold in balance, celebrating it, honoring it for what it was, that even as we turn to the new season we're being called to. And that new season will be exciting and scary and joyful, but always God-filled. And I invite us to embrace whatever God has in store for you and all of us in the next season to come, and in the season after that, and the season after that. Thanks be to God. Amen.